Before you buy a metal detector, there's some things you need to know. You need to know what the terminology means, first of all. Once you understand how a detector works, you can move on to deciding which features are important to you. You can then weigh that against their cost and choose the right one for you. The three main concepts that explain how a detector works are phase shift, target identification, and discrimination, and all three of them are interrelated. The easiest way to understand these three concepts is to look at the meter on an older White's Coin-Master metal detector. You can see that there's a dial. Notice along the top there are the words iron, gold, and silver. That is where the different metals fall on what we call the phase shift scale. This meter is simply measuring the phase shift of the object it sees in the ground. Let's zoom in a little. Now you can see the lower end of the phase shift scale. Notice the nickel and tabs areas. On this detector, if you find a nickel, the dial moves to the nickel zone and you hear a beep in the headphones. When you dig, you will most likely find a nickel. That's how target identification works. The dial points to a nickel, it identifies the coin in the ground. That's target identification. Right next to the nickel you'll see is a zone called tabs. These are the metal pull tabs that come off the tops of bottle sodas, soda cans, and the like. You'll notice that the tab zone overlaps a little bit with the nickels. That's deceptive. It really overlaps a lot. Very often when you're metal detecting, you find tabs that register as nickels or nickels that register as tabs. A good metal detector, which means expensive, will be able to tell the difference between the nickel and the pull tab. That ability to distinguish between the two objects that are close together on the phase shift scale is called discrimination. A detector with good discrimination will be able to sort out the nickels from the pull tabs. It will be able to tell the difference between a copper penny and a dime, which have similar phase shifts. That's how discrimination works. Here is the upper portion of the phase shift scale. Notice that most of the coins are at the upper end of the scale. You can see pennies and dimes overlap a little bit too, just like nickels and tabs. Again, an inexpensive detector might get the objects mixed up and tell you it's a penny when in actuality it's a dime, or vice versa. A detector with excellent discrimination will be more accurate in identifying the correct coin. The same is true for its ability to discriminate between coins and other metal objects in the ground. Did you understand that? Good, because now you know the three most important parts of metal detectors, the three most important concepts. Give yourself a pat on the back. So let's see how the concepts work in real-life examples. Here's what a phase shift scale might look like on a metal detector that's pretty modern. It's similar to the scale that we saw earlier. You might notice that pennies no longer overlap with dimes. That's because in 1981, the U.S. Mint switched from copper pennies to copper-coated zinc pennies. The zinc pennies have less phase shift than the copper pennies, so a zinc penny is more easily distinguished. I'm going to show you three detectors with increasing levels of discrimination. In general, detectors that have better discrimination abilities will cost more. The first example we'll look at is a detector that doesn't have a display. It uses sounds alone to distinguish targets. There are just 4 tones. The higher pitched tones represent more phase shift and therefore are more likely to be coins as opposed to junk or pull tabs. Let's look at how this works, and please ignore the funny looking man in the baggy clothes. I'm checking out the Tesoro Golden UMAX. The first thing you want to do is put down some coins. I've put down a quarter, a dime, and a pull tab. What you want to do is be able to tell the difference before you start looking. So what does a pull tab sound like? I've got the detector set on discrimination mode, and here it's a mid-frequency tone. You move to a coin, a dime, you hear that difference? It's a much higher frequency. It means you've got a coin. And same thing for a quarter. And look how I'm going to raise the coil. It's about 6-8 inches off the ground. You can still get that signal. So it's a high pitch frequency. Same thing for this, and then for the junk, it's going to be lower frequency. That's the first thing you want to learn, is those sounds. Now when you look in the ground, it's that low or medium frequency. It's actually jumping around, we don't know. So let's try that. I'm actually getting two frequencies. I don't know what it is. So we pinpoint it by crisscrossing. I'm going to use a probe. Use the probe to pinpoint it where it's loudest. So it's right about there. And I use my digger. And like I said, we got a mixed signal there. I don't know if it's a coin or a piece of junk. We'll see. And it is a coin, okay. It's a penny. See that? The zinc penny was right on the cusp between high-pitched and middle tone frequencies. That's why we got two different signals when we're scanning the ground. With this sound-only detector, we have a very low level of discrimination. The higher tones could be any of the coins on the right side of the scale. The middle tones could be a nickel or a pull tab. That's because the four tones span a wide area. Let's look at another detector with more discrimination. Here's a copy of the faceplate of a modern detector, the Garrett Ace 250, a very popular model. You'll notice there are 12 slots, or categories, at the bottom. The slots that are turned on are in black, and the ones turned off are in gray. This arrangement, where some of the slots are turned on, is called coin mode, because only slots with coins are turned on. As you can imagine, the 12 slots provide a lot more discrimination ability than just 4 tones. With the Ace 250, you can turn any of the 12 slots on or off. This is called notch filtering. If you turn off slots 5 and 6, you will not hear a signal for most of the pull tabs. Can you see how turning off and on different slots will give you greater control in your detecting? That's what notch filtering is all about. Finally, let's look at one of the high-end detectors. Here's a representation of the faceplate for the White's MXT detector. Instead of just 12 categories, the MXT uses visual discrimination identification numbers, VDI numbers, to identify the target. This provides a vastly improved level of detail. Instead of 4 categories or tones, or instead of 12 categories like on the Ace, you have VDI numbers that range from -95 to +95. Moreover, coins generally have their own distinct VDI numbers. A zinc penny, for example, might have a VDI of 67, a copper penny has a VDI of 77, and a dime might be 80, a clad dime, and a silver dime might be 81. A nickel on this machine is 20, while pull tabs range anywhere from 22 to 37. You can see that the increased discrimination is much more valuable and can tell you when to dig coins and when not to. As you can imagine, this level of resolution or discrimination goes a long way in identifying the targets you're looking for. It saves a lot of time digging, too. So there you have it. You learned about phase shift, discrimination, target ID, and the levels of discrimination that you can expect on different detectors. Your next step is to review specific detectors that you might be interested in and see how they handle discrimination. Good luck. Hope you learned something. This is Vince Migliore.